So we're going to go over something that you guys have talked about for many years in science. It's just a refresher. Um, but since we're talking about chemical formulas and chemical equations, I kind of wanted to take a step back and remind you of a couple things. So let's just briefly write some notes today over physical and chemical properties, which are descriptions of matter, and physical and chemical changes, something that's different of matter. Some examples of physical properties, which is a description: the color of something, the state of matter, talking about whether it's solid, liquid, or gas, the boiling and freezing point or melting point. For example, water, 100 Celsius, that's the boiling point. Okay, water freezing, 0 Celsius, that's the freezing point of water. Okay. Hardness, things like you did that in 6th grade. You tested different hardness, different types of rocks and minerals. And here is a short video to refresh your memory on mass, volume, and density, because volume and density are also physical properties. Okay. Malleability, the ability to be molded, to be changed into something. Iron, you get it hot enough and it's malleable. Solubility, the ability to be dissolved in a liquid or in water. Kool-Aid can be dissolved fairly quickly and fairly easily. If you put pepper in water, that doesn't really dissolve. Okay, chemical properties. Chemical properties. So we were talking about physical properties before. This is chemical properties. Chemical properties, it's the ability to react with something else. That's chemical properties. Okay. Physical properties were descriptions. Chemical properties it's the ability to react with another substance. So some examples of chemical properties would be the ability to react with air. So sometimes when things react with air, they go through chemical changes. For instance, rust. Okay. Rust is chemical reactions that happen because of the exposure to oxygen. Tarnish. Silver tarnishes. Corrosion or rot. This is when different things are exposed to the different gases in the air. Mostly talking about oxygen. The ability to react with water and acids is also a chemical property, and the ability to catch fire, flammability, or combustion. The ability to react with something else is a chemical property. So physical or chemical property, the ability of gunpowder and fire to explode. Gasoline ignites, releasing energy to fuel a car, something being combustible. That would be a chemical property. Physical or chemical property, the ability of a nail to rust. Okay, it would be exposed to oxygen, and that's a chemical reaction. So the ability to rust is a chemical property. Plastics don't rust, so they don't have this ability to rust. Okay, the ability of wood to burn, is that a physical or chemical property? Okay, that is a chemical property. Combustibility. The hardness of a diamond. Think back to 6th grade when you were testing hardness on different rocks and minerals. That is a physical property. Okay. Chemical changes. A change that occurs that causes the identity of a substance to change. It's a change that, whenever this change occurs, it causes the identity to change. So something new is created. Okay, something new is formed. The new substances now has new properties. It will have new, different properties. So this is a really important slide. Make sure you're writing these notes and you have them somewhere to reflect back on. This slide is very, very important because you're going to have to determine if there's a chemical change happening tomorrow, and you're going to have to tell me the evidence. What supports you saying if a chemical reaction happened? Okay, this is the evidence. Okay, sometimes a new color appears, a change of color. That could be evidence of a chemical change. Another piece of evidence could be if bubbles form, or if that's usually gas being released, fizzing. That's gas being released due to a chemical change. Precipitate. That means a solid forms. A solid forms. Difficult. Oh no, excuse me. Let's go to the other side. Heat is released or absorbed. That's another sign that a chemical change happened. Light is produced. Light is produced, so think of fireworks. Sound is given off. That's another piece of evidence. And lastly, it's important, it's difficult or nearly impossible to reverse the change. If you cook an egg, there's no way you can get it back to its original form because a chemical reaction happened. So let's look at some reactions with acid. Okay, if you take vinegar and baking soda and you add one to the other, you get a release of carbon dioxide gas. So the evidence here would be the bubbles or the fizzing. Okay, that is a sign of a chemical reaction happening. The evidence is the bubbles or the fizzing. Reaction with oxygen, and we call this oxidation. So a lot of times when iron is exposed to oxygen, you see rust. And so the evidence would be a change in color, it's rust. Reaction between different substances. So silver and sulfur in the air. There is some sulfur in the air that we breathe, and it reacts with the silver to tarnish. And if you have a tarnish or a certain rag that you can use for silver, you can polish, and then it winds up turning back to its original state. Okay, so if you have silver, you have to polish it to get the tarnish off. Some other examples of chemical reactions. Wood burning, you definitely can't put that back in its original state. Okay, that's an example. And another example is gasoline burning. So the gas and oxygen in the engine is ignited, and that is converted, that energy that's being released is converted into mechanical energy, which helps your car move and work. Some other chemical reactions, food digesting. So the food that you eat, it can't be used by your cells. It's too big. Your body has to break even the tiniest pieces of your food apart. And so here's an example of some protein. And you guys can, protein is in beans and chicken. But the protein, it's still too big. So during digestion, there are enzymes all throughout your digestive tract that you learned about last year that break up the proteins into smaller molecules, amino acids, that can fit into through cell membranes and be used by the body. Carbohydrates, if you guys remember from 7th grade, Carbohydrates are broken down by enzymes into simple sugars, which are then passed through cell membranes. And that's what goes to the mitochondria to release energy. If you remember all that from last year, that is a chemical change because it went from one type of molecule to another type. Baking. Baking is everything you do in the kitchen almost is due to chemical reactions. But these are all the reactants, if you will, and then this is your product. You definitely can't put this back to this. It does not go back to that. So that's a chemical change. Physical or chemical change. The ice on a lake melts to become water in the lake. So the ice here, it melts. Would that be a physical change or a chemical change? Okay. Well, that would be a physical change because ice is water. Liquid water is water. Steam is water. It's just changing the state it's in. Physical or chemical change. Charcoal in a fire turns to ash after several hours. You can't get this ash to go back to charcoal. Okay, so that's a chemical change. Okay, bicycle rust. Rust on there. That is a chemical change. We talked about rust before. Okay, that is just a refresher on physical and chemical changes. Make sure you have those notes and you're going to add to them tomorrow. Have a good day, guys.